The first time Sofia Azevedo held a human heart in her hands, she cried behind her mask. Dear viewers, welcome to our channel. Subscribe to receive more stories every day. It was her second year in residency at Santa Teresa Hospital. The operating room bathed in the harsh, fluorescent glow of midday. The equipment gleamed as if every instrument had been scrubbed to a holy sheen, and the sterile air seemed to hum with anticipation. Her gloved fingers trembled slightly as she guided the scalpel across the chest cavity of the patient, a woman who had come in on the brink of death, her heart a ticking time bomb. Sofia had been trained for moments like these, but nothing could have prepared her for this. The senior surgeon, a towering figure with a calm, measured voice, leaned close to her ear and whispered, "Touch lightly. It's a guest, not a possession." Her hand shook again, but this time she could feel the tremor in the heart. She couldn't tell if it was the organ reacting to the weight of the world upon it, or if it was her own fear transferring through the surgical gloves. But it was there, a trembling pulse beneath her fingers. She swore that day that she would never let that tremble escape her, that it would stay inside the body where it belonged. Years later, people would call her the Pulse Whisperer. She hated the nickname, hated the implication that she could somehow communicate with the heart in ways others could not, but the patients loved it, and so did the hospital's marketing team. It was an easy, catchy phrase that rolled off the tongue, and it made Sofia an asset in a city where medical competition was fierce. But Sofia did not care for fame. She cared about the hum of a monitor turning steady after a successful surgery, the quiet click of a valve behaving after it had been coaxed back into rhythm, the long exhale from a family when they realized their loved one would come home. These were the moments that kept her going. She lived for these quiet victories. But what she did not live for, what she loathed with all the intensity of a woman who had spent years clawing her way to the top, was courtrooms. And yet, that is where her life would lead her. The morning it began again. Sao Paulo wore the kind of glare that bleached color from the streets. It was a blistering heat, the sun an unrelenting eye in the sky. The courthouse steps were a slow climb under the weight of camera flashes, their bulbs popping like distant gunfire, and microphones were thrust into her face like scalpels, seeking to cut into her private life. The whispers had fermented in the city's rumor mill for months. An organ trafficking ring, and the shadowy figure at the center of it all, a disgraced anesthesiologist. The whispers pointed toward Sofia's ex-husband. Sofia Azevedo, were you aware of the illegal transplants? Did you sign procurement forms outside protocol? Is it true your unborn child was? The last question sliced through her defenses like a razor. Her stomach tightened, and for the briefest of moments, her thoughts scattered like paper caught in the wind. The air around her felt thin, as if it had been sucked out of the universe. But Sofia did not break stride. She had learned long ago that the best defense was not to engage, not to give an inch. Her lawyer, a small woman with a voice like a hinge, quiet yet capable of turning on a dime, kept pace beside her. "Keep your eyes front," she murmured, her voice steady but firm. "Remember, you're a witness, not a defendant. We tell the truth. We do not volunteer. We do not bleed for them." But Sofia had already bled. Years ago. In paper. Inside, courtroom 12 smelled of varnish and old grievances. The air hung heavy, suffocating almost, with the weight of everything unspoken. At the far end of the room sat the defendant, Raphael. His posture was perfect, his suit immaculate. He looked the same as he had the day they met, expensive, polished, and utterly certain that the world would bend to his will. He didn't look at her. Sofia lowered herself into the first row of benches behind the prosecution, the cold wood pressing against her palm as she ran her hand along the bench's edge. She catalogued the room like she would an operating theater. Exits, air vents. No, just air circulation ducts, positions of each player. Judge Mendez, white hair, a reputation for patience that had stretched taut like surgical thread over the years. Prosecutor Almeida, neat pages stacked like tiles on a roof. The defense, a spectacle of a man who seemed to thrive on it. And then, a woman caught Sofia's attention, seated in the row behind Raphael, a hand resting on a small swell beneath her belt. Pregnant. Sofia's breath caught in her throat. She glanced away quickly, as if her gaze might burn the scene into the very fabric of the room. "Ready?" her lawyer asked, her voice a thread of calm in the chaos. "No," Sofia said, her voice low but steady. "But I'm here." The bailiff announced the judge, and everyone rose in unison, a choreographed dance of respect. The judge took his seat. Motions, objections, A parade of dates and deposits, names of foreign clinics that had disappeared from existence as soon as the papers had been served. And somewhere, buried in the slurry of names and numbers, Sophia heard her own name called. Dr. Sofia Azevedo, attending cardiac surgeon, Hospital Santa Teresa. It hit her like a wave crashing against the rocks. 2 years, 2 long years, she had spent rebuilding that name, piece by piece, one patient at a time. 2 years of Sunday clinics for low-income families, of lectures no one paid for, of the quiet humility of asking younger doctors to double-check her notes just so no one could say she was sloppy. She had done it because she believed in medicine, yes. But she had also done it because of the day Raphael slid a form across a kitchen table and said, "Sign here or we'll never see our child again." It had been a small apartment, lemon tiles underfoot, a balcony too narrow for anything but a plant and 2 mugs. The city leaned into its wet heat, the air thick with humidity, and Sophia had been 6.5 months pregnant, swollen ankles aching between surgeries. Raphael had stopped pretending to be fine the week before. Midnight calls. Money that didn't add up. Panic in his breath when he kissed her temple. "What is it?" she had asked, laying a hand on the soft rise where their daughter hiccuped. "Rafa, what is it?" He had promised her he'd fix it. He always promised. Then came the paper, an authorization. A correction of a clerical error, he said, that would delay an urgent transplant for a child. "It's your license number, Sophie, it needs your signature," he'd said. "It's just a formality. Minutes matter." Her eyes had locked onto the line where her name was to go. She felt the tremor again. It was in her hands this time, but the weight of it was the same. "Bring it to the hospital, I'll run it by procurement," she began. Raphael's face had changed. His grip tightened around her wrist, turning her palm up. "If you take this to the hospital, everything slows down. Paperwork crawls. You know this." "I also know this isn't how we do it," she had replied. "Sometimes rules get in the way of saving lives," he had said. His voice smooth, coaxing. "Sign it, Sophie. For our daughter." That was when she had understood. He wasn't threatening harm. He was threatening to make their daughter vanish. To make her disappear in paperwork. A theft without a bruise. With a shaking hand, Sophia had signed. 2 weeks later, Raphael vanished. By the time he disappeared, that clerical correction had opened a path for other forms to travel, bleeding into one another at an astonishing speed. Names of donors with no families. Recipients who skipped the queue. Sophia had started to feel it, wrongness. The smell of it never left the room. And yet she didn't stop him. She didn't stop him because she believed that it was for their daughter, that it was for the future. And then he disappeared, taking everything. His phone. Their savings. The promises he had made. But Sophia had kept their daughter. She'd changed hospitals, hired a private nurse, and carried their baby close, her phone always within reach. The delivery was ordinary, clean, and holy. She named their daughter Leah. A small name, a name with room to grow. When the investigators came, they did not storm her door. They knocked. "Dra. Azevedo," they said softly. "We're sorry to bring this to your door." They laid the papers out like a morgue drawer. The signature, her signature, was everywhere. Sophia did not deny it. She told them about the night, about Raphael's threat, about the vanishing. But the investigators, hardened men with soft eyes when it came to babies, believed her enough to pause. Hospital counsel believed her enough not to fire her, at least not yet. The medical board did not. Suspended. That was 2 years ago. Now, in courtroom 12, the case had ripened, and Sophia's world had been turned upside down again. The court had been in recess for an hour, but the air in courtroom 12 still felt thick with tension, like a room too full of unspoken things. Sophia's feet were planted firmly on the ground as she stared at the pages in front of her. Her mind felt 1,000 miles away, traveling through the maze of her memories, each turn a sharp edge that cut deeper than the last. Dr. Azevedo. The prosecutor Almeida called, bringing her back to the present. "Your testimony yesterday raised a question about the missing signatures. Could you explain to the court how your signature was used without your consent, and what steps you took once you realized it?" The room fell into an almost complete silence as Sophia cleared her throat. The words that had once seemed so easy to say. The truth, her truth. felt like stones in her throat. But she didn't flinch. She had learned to stand steady in the face of pressure. "Yes, Mr. Almeida," she began, her voice steady but cold, betraying none of the nervousness that churned beneath. "When I signed the first form, I did so because I was threatened. My then husband, Raphael, said that if I didn't sign it, our child, our unborn child, would be removed from the system and disappear. Not harmed physically, but erased from existence. I signed it because I believed that signing would protect her. That was my mistake." She paused, her eyes scanning the faces in the courtroom. The jury looked impassive, but the prosecutors took notes. The defense. Raphael's side. They stared at her with eyes of stone, as if they were waiting for the right moment to tear her apart. Almeida nodded, then asked the next question, the one she knew would come. "And after you signed, what did you do when you realized the form had been used for something far worse than you had thought?" Sophia's hand instinctively moved to the necklace she wore, the one her daughter had given her for her last birthday, a small silver heart. She gripped it tightly, as if it could hold her together. "I tried to report it. I contacted hospital compliance and requested a review of the documents. But by the time the investigation started, Raphael had already disappeared." Sophia's words echoed in the courtroom, but for a moment, it felt as though they were swallowed by the weight of the air around her. The defense, as expected, leapt in, trying to strike her testimony apart. "Objection!" The defense attorney interjected smoothly. "This is all hearsay, Mr. Almeida. There's no evidence to support the claim that Dr. Azevedo was unaware of these so-called illegal transplants." The judge, a man with experience written into every wrinkle of his face, raised his hand. Sustained. "Dr. Azevedo, you will answer the question directly, without speculation." Sophia took a deep breath, holding the tension in her chest for a moment before releasing it. The pressure of the room felt palpable, but she could feel the truth pulling her through, thread by thread. "I didn't know about the extent of what Raphael had done until the investigation came. I didn't know that my signature was being used for a network of illegal transplants. But I will tell you this. I would never knowingly authorize an illegal transplant. Not then, not now." The room buzzed with whispers. People in the gallery shifted in their seats. But the questions kept coming, each one like a surgical incision, each one meant to peel back layers of Sophia's life and expose the raw wounds that had festered beneath for too long. "Dr. Azevedo, did you know the full extent of the network your ex-husband was allegedly running?" Almeida asked. "No," Sophia replied, and for a moment her voice cracked. "I didn't." The prosecutor stood, pacing slowly in front of her. "How much did you suspect then when you signed that form?" His voice had dropped, as if trying to pull something out of her that she didn't want to give. She didn't flinch. "I didn't know what I was signing. I was told it was necessary to save a life. But when I found out the truth, I immediately cooperated with the investigation, even when it meant my career, my life. Everything I had built was at risk. I wanted justice for the people whose lives were ruined by the system I thought I was part of." Almeida nodded, satisfied. He could see the cracks in her story, but for now they were filled with truth, and that was enough. He turned toward the judge. "Your Honor, the prosecution rests for now." There was a murmur in the gallery, and the judge looked over at the defense. Raphael's attorney stood with a slow, deliberate motion, his expression unreadable. "We'll need to call our next witness, Your Honor," he said, but his tone was too casual, too calculated. A moment of silence passed. The room, if it was possible, seemed to hold its breath. The bailiff called out, "The defense calls Dr. Augusto Arentz." Sophia's heart sank. Dr. Arentz was the chief of surgery at Santa Teresa, and he had once been one of Sophia's mentors. He had recommended her for her current position, written glowing letters of recommendation, and had been the one to introduce her to the world of cardiology. Sophia had trusted him. And now he was about to take the stand for the defense. The defense's strategy was clear. They were going to pin everything on her actions, and on the small choice she had made that day, back in that kitchen with a form. The defense attorney began with a simple question. Dr. Arentz, you've known Dr. Azevedo for years, correct? Yes, Arentz said, his voice calm, almost detached. I trained her. She's one of the most talented surgeons I've ever worked with. So, you're aware that she signed forms outside protocol. The defense was working hard to chip away at her credibility, slowly and deliberately. Dr. Arentz didn't blink. People make mistakes, he said, voice steady, offering a well-practiced reply. But I don't believe Dr. Azevedo would knowingly break protocol. She's a dedicated doctor, someone who believes in the sanctity of the work we do. Sophia's hands clenched into fists beneath the table. She had trusted Arentz, but there was something about his presence now, something that made her stomach twist. He wasn't the same man she had once admired. He was a tool now, a cog in the defense's machine. The defense attorney pressed on, poking at the edges of the investigation. And were you aware that, shortly before Mr. Azevedo disappeared, an unusual clustering of transplant authorizations were processed at Santa Teresa? He paused, eyes flicking to Sophia. Were those forms signed by Dr. Azevedo? Arentz hesitated just enough to suggest uncertainty. Yes, I was made aware. But I wasn't directly involved. The signatures were not all hers. The defense attorney smiled thinly. But you didn't intervene, did you, doctor? You didn't stop it when you knew something was wrong. The implication hung in the air like a dark cloud. I didn't know what was wrong, Arentz replied, his tone now defensive. I'm not the one who signs off on procurement. The defense lawyer raised an eyebrow. But you knew, didn't you? Sophia could feel the walls of the courtroom closing in. They were shifting the blame now, and it was clear they were hoping to drag her down with them. But Sophia wasn't the same woman who had signed that form 2 years ago. She had learned to stand tall, even when everything inside her wanted to collapse. Dr. Azevedo, the defense continued, you've heard the testimony of Dr. Arentz. Do you agree with his assessment? No, Sophia replied firmly. I did what I thought was right at the time, but I never meant for it to go this far. And I would never knowingly sign something that would harm a patient. That's the line I've always drawn as a doctor. The defense attorney shifted his position, clearly trying to regain the upper hand. So, you admit your signature was used for illegal activities, but you didn't know the full scope of it? Yes, Sophia said, her voice a little sharper now. That's exactly right. The defense dropped his argument for the moment, but Sophia knew the worst was yet to come. The gavel echoed like a heartbeat, each strike amplifying the tension in the room. Sophia's hands were still clenched tightly, the edges of her fingers turning white beneath the pressure. The courtroom was alive with whispers, murmurs that seemed to swirl around her, but Sophia didn't focus on them. She was focused on the task ahead, keeping steady, even though everything inside her wanted to fall apart. The trial had reached its final stretch. The defense had rested, and now, it was time for the closing arguments. Both sides would try to claim the victory they so desperately needed, but the truth was more complicated than anyone could imagine. Sophia had been dragged into this mess, but she had no intention of allowing anyone to paint her as the villain. She would tell the truth, no matter the consequences. The defense's closing was as calculated as it had been throughout the trial. Their attorney stood tall, arms spread wide, playing to the jury like an actor delivering a soliloquy. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, what we have here is a woman who made a mistake. A tragic mistake. But a mistake nonetheless. Yes, Dr. Azevedo signed a form. Yes, it was outside protocol. But does that make her guilty of the crimes her ex-husband committed? Well, we must separate the actions of Dr. Azevedo from those of her estranged husband, Raphael. This case is not about a man who disappeared. It's not about a woman's failure to uphold rules that were meant to protect life. It's about the legal ramifications of a decision she made under duress. He paused, his eyes sweeping the jury. This woman is not a criminal. She is a doctor who made a terrible choice, but who believed she was acting in the best interest of her child. The prosecution would have you believe she is guilty of a grand conspiracy, a scheme to bypass organ transplant protocols. But the evidence does not support that. There are no clear records linking Dr. Azevedo to the crimes her ex-husband allegedly committed. There is no proof that she had any knowledge of the illegal activities. Sophia could hear her pulse in her ears, the steady thrum of her heartbeat that seemed to echo louder with each passing word. The defense wasn't trying to prove her innocence. They were trying to sow doubt. They wanted to create confusion in the minds of the jury, to make them question the clarity of the evidence. And it was working. But Sophia wouldn't let them have the final word. She couldn't. When it was time for the prosecution's closing, Almeida rose with quiet determination. His eyes sharp, unwavering. He didn't need theatrics. He didn't need a grand performance. All he needed was the truth. And the truth was that Rafael Azevedo's plan had been a calculated one. His attempts to manipulate and control had not ended when he disappeared. No, they had only begun. This case is not about mistakes, Almeida began. It is not about whether or not Dr. Azevedo made a single poor choice under pressure. This case is about something far more insidious. It is about the theft of lives, the manipulation of the very systems that are supposed to protect us, and the abuse of trust. Dr. Azevedo was caught in the web spun by her husband, but she was also complicit in the choices she made. She signed a form that she knew, on some level, was wrong. And when she discovered that her signature had been used for illegal purposes, she did not go to the authorities immediately. She did not stop it. She allowed it to happen. Almeida paused, his gaze steady and fierce. But Dr. Azevedo also found a way to make things right. She cooperated with the investigation, and she tried to undo the damage she had unknowingly caused. She exposed the truth. She went to the police. She fought back against the system that had been corrupted. But it's not just about whether or not she did the right thing in the end. It's about the consequences of her actions, and the ripple effects they had. And now, those consequences are before you. He let that last statement sit in the air, each word weighing heavily on the jury. Sophia could feel the eyes of the jury on her, could hear the faint hum of their scrutiny. But she didn't let it break her focus. She had lived this case for 2 years now. She had carried the weight of her mistakes, the consequences of those decisions, for longer than she could count. But she had also made the choice to rebuild her life, to stand here, and to fight. She wasn't going to back down now. The judge, looking exhausted but resolute, called for the jury to deliberate. The tension in the room was palpable, every person caught in the in-between, waiting for the next move in this high-stakes game of legal chess. Outside the courtroom, the media circus began again. The press swarmed, microphones thrust forward, their questions pointed, cutting into the air like blades. But Sophia didn't stop. She walked down the courthouse steps, one foot in front of the other, her head high. She wasn't going to let their words define her anymore. She could hear her lawyer at her side, a steady presence in the chaos. "They're going to try to break you," her lawyer murmured. "But you're not broken. You've done the right thing. They can't take that away from you." "I'm not broken," Sophia said, her voice low but sure. She wasn't lying. She had walked through hell and had come out on the other side. The next day, Sophia stood again in the courtroom. The verdict would be announced shortly. The air was still, too still, like the silence before a storm. And then it came. The foreman's voice was steady as he read the verdict aloud. "We find the defendant, Rafael Azevedo, guilty on all counts." Sophia felt the flood of relief wash over her. But it was muted, tempered by the knowledge that no matter the verdict, her life had already been forever changed. Rafael's crimes had hurt many people, including herself, but this was justice. And justice had finally been served. But it didn't end there. The following weeks brought their own revelations. The investigators, in their pursuit of the truth, had unearthed deeper layers of the trafficking ring. Layers that went beyond Sophia's involvement. And the more they uncovered, the clearer it became that Rafael had been part of something far larger than anyone had imagined. When the dust settled, the hospital had made changes to its protocols. Security was tightened, Medical records were better protected, and the names of those involved in the trafficking ring were sealed away in the shadowed corners of the investigation files. Sophia, however, had her own work to do. She returned to the operating room, where the hum of monitors and the steady rhythm of a heartbeat were the only sounds she needed. Her hands, steady once again, moved with precision as she repaired another heart, this time with no secrets in the shadows, no hidden agendas behind her signature. That night, as she sat alone in her apartment, Sophia found an envelope slid under her door. No return address. Inside, a single sheet of paper. It was a copy of the first form she had ever signed. Her signature, the one Raphael had manipulated, the one that had started this whole mess. Across the top, in neat handwriting that wasn't hers, were 4 simple words. Paper is not faster. A smile, small but genuine, tugged at the corners of Sophia's mouth. She understood the message. Paper could be moved, could be rewritten. But people, the ones who had the strength to stand in the face of adversity, could never be erased. Sophia fed the paper into the shredder, piece by piece, until there was nothing left to move. She had finally reclaimed her life. And for the first time in years she felt free. Dear viewers, thank you for watching. If you like this story, please subscribe to our channel to receive more stories every day. Share with us what you think of this story and tell us where you're watching from.